Hello everyone and welcome to this video on cymbal and cymbal playing. In this video we'll talk about this instrument here, the right cymbal, which is essentially possibly the most important thing that we do when we play jazz drums. And so it deserves some attention. And in this video, I will use some special terminology that I like to first present to you, and then I'll keep going on, and we'll discover a little more about this incredible instrument. So you'll hear me talking in this video about the pulse. The pulse is the tempo of our song, but it also is something that is articulated on the cymbal line. Any line that is played on this instrument usually contains the main pulse of the song that we're going to be playing. Then there are the skip notes. The skip notes are notes that are usually in between the pulses, and so they are ornamenting, if you want, our line, and they're usually placed in the classic jazz cymbal line. They're usually placed after the second and after the fourth beat, so or after fourth pulse, but we'll see that later. I will talk about cymbal lines. So I will mention the classic jazz right pattern, which is the one that will be the main character of this video, but also I will talk about open lines or broken lines. And these are cymbal lines that evolved based on the classic jazz cymbal pattern. They evolved becoming a little more complicated, if you want, or just more rich in terms of like how many notes and how they are articulated. Sometimes open or broken cymbal lines can be improvised. Let's talk about the pulse, the first thing, the building blocks of our cymbal line. The first is the pulse. As I said before, talking about the pulse, it's talking about music. Any song, any jazz tune has a tempo. And as far as a type of music that is African derived, jazz has this specific characteristic that when we start, we set a tempo that has to stay the same until the end of the song. This is typical. It's different from classical music, where, for example, all the repertoire can undergo a change in tempo, but usually in all the African-derived music, the tempo, once it's set, it stays. And this brings with itself a special characteristic. Since there's this need of keeping the pulse, time shouldn't be dragging and time shouldn't be speeding up. Okay, so that's why the pulse is such an important thing, because, and this is the catch, we have to keep it precise, but we don't want to keep it mechanic, so in fear of speeding up or slowing down. So time in jazz is metronomic, but not mechanic. And having a good pulse that carries a certain energy but doesn't change or affect the overall tempo, it's a very important thing to do. So let me just play a jazz line with only the pulse. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. So a cymbal line can feature exclusively the pulse and be already quite effective. There's a number of drummers that have done so. The pulse, if has this edge towards the top of the beat, so if everything is pushing a little bit, so we are providing a certain propelling force to the beat without rushing, and this is sustaining the bend, the pulse can be sufficient to deliver a very effective cymbal line. Okay, let me try with the metronome. I'll show you a little bit what I mean by saying that the pulse should be a little bit ahead. So I have my metronome set at 70 BPM. That's the pulse. That's the pulse of our song, of our tune. And I'm gonna place the snare drum on the beat. I'm gonna try to be as precise as possible. And I'm gonna try to push a little bit on the snare. On the cymbal, okay? So So I'll play, for those who know it, I play a flam, a stroke that arrives slightly before the main one. I'll take away the main hand, the snare drum. Okay, as you can see here, I'm not necessarily speeding up, I'm just giving this little edge. So why is this edge important? Why do we need to have a pulse that is assertive and somehow drives the band? Well, imagine to play with a band and the soloist likes to play his line or her line a little bit behind or just to float around the tempo, okay? Well, in that case, bass and drums need to give to the soloist, give to the band the possibility of just like choosing a little bit what to do, but the push has to be there. So it's a necessity, not for us, but for the band to have a driving pulse. Okay, usually the pulse can be helped with a little bit of like feathering of the bass drum. Okay, so just a note that goes along with the bass and with the cymbal line, just to give a little bit of a low end. And I have my 2 and 4 here, and some variations on the snare. And that's ready, my cymbal line only with the pulse. One thing that I like to say with the pulse is to distribute a movement well on the cymbal, okay? You want to have a movement that fills up the space. Let's put our metronome at 50, another exercise you can do. You see, I'm trying to distribute my movement, the part that goes up, just to repair what it goes down, and to really divide the beat in two. I'm not too concerned about being hyper precise. It's almost like, think about it like artificial intelligence. When you read a text from artificial intelligence, you can see it's a machine. And we want to humanize as much as possible our tempo, okay? So of course we need to be precise, but it's not a question of being quantized, okay? Time in jazz is alive. And listen to the great records. There are some records where they even speed up. Now, this is not an excuse, of course, to speed up, but sometimes when the energy goes up and, you know, everybody's like pushing, it can happen that the time goes up, okay? It's less tolerated when the time goes down. So when we drag, because usually it coincides with a lack of energy from all the band. Okay, so this is the pulse. Now, let's talk about the skip note. The skip note could take hours. We could take hours and talk about the skip notes. Let's talk about the placement of the skip notes in the classic jazz cymbal line. So before the third and before the first beat, or after the second, in between the second and the third, and in between the fourth and the one. For those who know what I'm talking about and that can read music, you have it written in either side here. So now, if I only play the pulse, as we said before, yes, I do have an effective line, but 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1. Now I'm placing a skip note. The skip note brings another type of spice inside the mix. Let's try to see if we can move it, the position of the skip note, we can move it within the 2 beats. The closest we can describe the position of a skip note is by comparing it with the third triplet. So the third 8-note triplet that we would have. So check this out. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Usually it's a good approximation. It's what explains to a lot of students and really make you understand where it's statistically placed, this skip note. But if I subdivide, for those who can understand me, in 4, and so I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I place the skip note as the fourth 16 notes. Then I still have a skip note that is valid and can still swing, can still belong to a cymbal line. And that's what I'm talking about. This is like a personal way of hearing it. And I can assure you there's drummers that hear it in between the triplet and the fourtuplet. So again, I said before, it's not scientific and gives us another element to consider the power of the pulse as the engine. Because if the skip note can change, the pulse cannot change. That's why the pulse is so important, because it allows us to play around with the skip notes. So let's try to do one example of 16 note based triplet and one example, we're gonna start with that, of triplet based skip note. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, triplet. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. As you can see, I'm always trying to have a movement that is always the same. I want to sort of have a pendulum type of mechanism here, well distributed in time. I'm keeping my pulse going here with my bass drum and the 2 and 4 on the hi-hat. Let's go to the 16 based skip note. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Okay. Let's go back to the triplets. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1. That's an exercise that I would ask you to do, that I would recommend. It sheds a certain light and a certain easiness of approach, because you don't want to be stuck with one way of pronouncing. The only thing that should take, in a certain sense, quite scientifically, it's the pulse. The pulse, as it's probably the 10th time I say it in its video, has that quality. The skip note, if the pulse is providing everything, then you can really play. One thing that I would like to also make sure you understand, when I play my jazz cymbal pattern, this one, and I'm gonna play it with the whole kit, the straight ahead jazz cymbal pattern, you know, I'm phrasing with my snare, trying to do simple phrases with the bass drum and snare, and this stays always the same, okay? This, to give you a little bit of a history, was the case for the first, I would say, half of the history of jazz. That's why this cymbal pattern is so important for us, because starting from the 30s up until the end of the 50s, drummers would play the cymbal always with this pattern. They would never change anything. Let's give it in a nutshell, the history of drum rhythm. New Orleans and until like early jazz time was more or less here. Strainer should go up. Okay. And then a little bit after, they started to play this time on the cymbal. And after a little bit, they said, you know what? Okay, they started phrasing on the cymbal. That's where all this that we're talking about begins. And it's the 30s. It stays like this until the 50s, until the end of the 50s. At a certain point, drummers decide that they can ornament and change the position of skip notes. And those are what we commonly talk and describe as being the broken cymbal lines, okay? And usually the position of the skip note is improvised. Nowadays, if you even if you go to one very, very like bebop, hard bop, so traditional classic jazz concert, the drummer will most likely change the phrasing on the cymbal. There's virtually nobody that still plays with this. But, you know, it's so important to know and to master the classic form of a cymbal line to then move ahead. In fact, when we study coordination, we always, at the beginning, you know, pass by this line. But just to give you an example, it's not uncommon to hear, it's actually very common to hear lines like this one where I'm going to improvise the skip line, the skip note. Now, in this case, the cymbal line is becoming part of what I'm building here with all the limbs. So it's an improvisatory approach that it's a spin-off of the classic this against this duality of like straight cymbal line and everything goes against has to be mastered before we move on to different type of language. Okay, so that's why I'm talking about the classic right cymbal pattern. So let's give like just to finish off this video, the importance of the pulse, and you have two exercises. Okay, you can try to play with two hands, sort of like creating this difference with this hand a little bit before and this hand on the center of the beat. Okay, you can practice your pulse just with the metronome and just try to distribute your movement really clearly. Okay, usually it's a little bit of forearm for me on certain tempos, and really try to give a little weight when you land on the cymbal. You don't want to be shy. You want to mean that, and you want to take out sound from this instrument. Usually the best spot where to play a cymbal, it's if you divide it in 3, 1, 2, 3, it's in between the first and second here. Here you have too much crash, so it's too much of an open sound, and here it's too thin. Okay, then for choices, of course, you can always use the whole cymbal. The great drummers, they employ the entire cymbal, but to really get the sweet spot, it's here. Okay, so pulse and then skip note. Experiment in placing the skip note between in triplets or in fourtuplets, so 16 notes or triplet. You don't have to read music here, you just count 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. I'll write it down. And also you can do it in fourtuplets. 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1. In that case, it's the 4 you want to do. So it's 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1. Okay, so you have your pulse, your skip notes, and then you have all the stuff that we said about really taking care of this special right cymbal pattern and master it, and try to listen to a lot of drummers that play that. Okay, and then get yourself a nice cymbal and enjoy playing it. It's a great thing. That's the secret to play jazz with people, is to provide great tempo. That's all it matters. If you can provide great tempo to a band, then you're already on the right way to enjoy playing jazz drums with other people. All right, I hope you like this video. I will see you again. Welcome to my studio. Thank you so much. To the next one. Ciao, ciao.